So, today is January 2nd, 2024. I don't know about you guys, that just feels weird to say. I slept in today. I don't have formal work or anything until tomorrow. So my plan for today is just to clean my house. So while I do that, we're also going to be talking about organization in terms of songwriting and why that's important and how that can help you. First, I'm going to shower and get dressed and shave this monstrosity. I grew this out for the Simple Life music video, but it's time to get this hideous thing off my face. All right, let's chat. So like I said, today we're going to be talking about organization for songwriters. More specifically, I'm going to give you 6 strategies and processes that I use that help me stay organized in my writing process. Now, before we get into this, there's one important thing to consider, and that is that organization is not the end-all be-all. There is such a thing as being too organized and too structured to the point where it's suffocating and it saps you of all your creativity. What we want is to find the right balance between order and chaos that helps us optimize our workflow and squeeze the most out of our processes, but also leaves the door cracked for creativity and allows us to break free of our traditional constraints. So for all of these tips today, take everything with a grain of salt. Whatever you think will work for you and will apply to your process, take that with you, and anything that you think won't be useful for you, just leave it at the door. All right. This place is a mess. We've got our work cut out for us today. So let's survey the damage real quick, and then we'll get started with tip number 1. So I've scoped out the situation, and I think the best place to start is by making my bed and folding some laundry. So while I'm doing that, let's talk about tip 1, which is organize your lyrics. You wouldn't believe how many students I have, or even professional songwriters I've worked with, who they write up and they type up their lyrics and they look like this. It's just a jumbled mess. You don't really know where the verses are, you can't tell them from a pre-chorus, chorus. The lines aren't even divided up by the rhyme scheme, which is, to me, that's crazy. Now, I'm not a naturally organized person, so I learned from a young age that I have to be super organized with my lyric writing, or there's no way I'll be able to follow what I'm writing. It's the only way for me to even remember which section is which when I'm writing a new song. What I can do is I can break these up really nicely into stanzas. I can make sure everything is capitalized consistently, the punctuation is consistent. I can split the lines in the most appropriate place. And if I want to, I can even label my sections. That way I know instantly what's what just from looking at the lyric sheet. Now, obviously I can do this retroactively if I'm writing my lyrics on the computer. Well, what if I'm writing them by hand? The truth is, if you're writing your lyrics by hand, you're just gonna have to be more organized to begin with. The good news is it's something you can practice. If you consistently work on dividing your lyrics up into sections, being consistent with your capitalization, punctuation, double checking spelling, just putting a little time and care into your lyrics, it's my personal belief that the results will show in the quality of your songwriting. So that's how you get organized lyrics, and this is how you get an organized bed. And you know what? Since I knocked out tip number 1 so quickly, I'll give you tip 2 while I'm folding this laundry. All right, so tip 2 is to plan certain elements of your song in advance. Now, this is more of a beginner intermediate tip because, frankly, once you've done this for a while, you will be able to just write songs on the fly. You won't really have to do much prep in advance to get the song that you're looking for. However, this can still be useful, and this is actually something that I do all the time. In fact, in every single songwriting challenge video that you see from me, I'll have certain things pre-planned. Maybe I'll have decided on a chord progression in advance, or I'll have chosen some rules and stipulations that I have to adhere to. Now, you don't have to have the whole song mapped out before you start the writing process, but having a few things taken care of in advance can limit the number of choices you have to make while you're actually writing the song. And it can help combat the choice fatigue you'll inevitably feel down the line as you get deeper into the song and you've made more and more decisions. So decide on some things to have prepared. Make a couple decisions before you start and see if that helps your process stay more organized as you work through it. All right, let's get through this laundry pile and get the rest of this room clean. Whew, okay. I don't know why doing laundry always takes a lot out of me, but it's done. We're good to go. I'm gonna go grab some lunch real quick, then we'll talk about tip number 3. All right, Just wrapped up lunch, got my very messy still kitchen behind me. Let's talk tip 3. So tip 3 is to stay structured with how you store your completed songs. Now, there's probably a ton of different ways to do this, but let me show you what I do. So I keep all of my songs in a playlist in my, what used to be iTunes library. I guess it's now the Apple Music library or personal music library on MacBooks. Whatever the case, you see it right here. Now the system that I use, I started in college and I've just used it ever since then. Now there's really no rhyme or reason for this other than I thought it was cool at the time. I group my songs into like 12 song quote unquote albums. And the way that I view these is as kind of a snapshot of where I am in life at that time. I can go back through these albums and revisit moments from my past. The songs will often just transport me back to where I was, what I was doing, how I was feeling, who I was hanging out with at the time. So I'll do that and then I'll generate a photo, add some text for an album image, nothing super official, this is just for me. And then I organize them into playlists. Each playlist is a group of 4 years. How it started was this 3919 files playlist. That was the house number of the house that I lived in college. So this playlist includes every song I wrote while I was in college. Since that spanned a 4-year stretch, I figured that I would keep it consistent and have each playlist reflect the next 4 years. Now I'm 30 years old, so that means I'm working my way through the 4th playlist at this point. I graduated in 2015, so then I have the 2015 to 2019 files playlist, the 2019 to 2023 files playlist, and then the one I've started this year that will take me all the way to 2027. I also have this 2012-files playlist, which includes just everything I've written since I started using this system in 2012. As you can see, quite a lot of songs. And if I didn't have this way to organize them, so many of these would have just disappeared into the abyss by now, and I'd never be able to find them again. And honestly, this playlist doesn't even include everything I've ever written. I'd say probably a third to a quarter of what I write, I actually finish up and lands on this playlist. Now, I've written thousands of songs, right? So I can't just go back and listen to them all. But even just scrolling through, seeing the titles, seeing the albums that they're on, seeing the approximate time in which they were written, I sort of remember the cliff notes, and I can seek out the songs that I might actually want to revisit and that are important to me or that I maybe want to rewrite. I also keep all of these backed up on an external hard drive and in cloud storage. So that's just my system. I just needed a way to keep everything organized and structured so I could always find the songs that I'm looking for. But you can develop your own. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or complicated, but if you end up writing a lot of songs, it'll save you a lot of pain and strife in the long term when you go back looking for things. If you have an organized system, you'll be able to find everything much more easily, and you'll know that you'll always have your library to draw from if you need it. All right, let's go get this bedroom clean. All right, room is clean. Next up is the living room, kitchen, dining room space. And quite frankly, I've been procrastinating on this. So let's procrastinate a little bit longer by talking about tip 4. Tip number 4 is make good use of repetition. Now, this is something, if you've been following this channel for a bit, you've probably heard me talk about before. But repetition is so important in good songwriting. It's what creates something memorable that'll get stuck in people's heads and help them continue to sing it to themselves after they're done listening. And it can also organize your songwriting process even a little bit more so that there's just that many fewer things to keep track of. For example, typically when you have a bunch of choruses in a song, they'll all have the same lyrics. You can take this further too. Let's say you have a pre-chorus before the first chorus and then also a pre-chorus before the second chorus. If you feel like it would be too much to have 2 distinct pre-choruses with different lyrics, you can copy the lyrics from one to the other for the pre-chorus as well. Now again, there is a way to do too much here, right? There is such thing as overkill. With rare exceptions to the rule, if you just copy the same lyrics from the verse, the pre-chorus, and then the chorus, and then have all of that repeat exactly verbatim with no changes, that's probably gonna get stale. Probably not gonna be that exciting. People will tune out pretty quickly. So like I mentioned earlier, we have to find that line between order and chaos, right? Now the same thing can be said of chord progressions. Now if you listen to pop radio, maybe 30 to 50% of the time, a song will just have the same chord progression all the way through. The intrigue and the excitement will come from the changes in the melody line, the lyrics, the production choices, but the chord progression remains pretty simplistic. You don't have to go to this extreme, of course, but it is possible that if you have a chord progression for your verse and then a vastly different chord progression for your pre-chorus, then a vastly different chord progression for your chorus, and something entirely different for the bridge, it might just be too much. The listener might get overwhelmed and you might get overwhelmed writing it. It's a lot to wrap your head around and keep track of. So simplify things for the audience and also simplify things for yourself. The more you make use of repetition, the fewer things you have to keep track of over the course of writing a song. All right, let's get this space cleaned up. All right, Not perfect, but whatever is. All right, now I'm in the studio, which is the final room in the house which needs some serious work. Before I get going on this one, let's talk about tip number 5. So tip number 5 is schedule your songwriting time. Make a routine out of it, make a habit out of it. Maybe if you enjoy getting up early, maybe instead of laying in bed and checking your phone for 30 minutes, you can get up and go grab the instrument of your choice, a notebook, and do 30 minutes of songwriting. If you're a night owl, maybe you do it when you're home from work in the evening. After you've eaten dinner, you're settling in, starting to unwind before bed. Just make a habit of sitting down, letting some ideas out. Maybe it's something you do on your lunch break. I can't tell you when or how to schedule it, but setting up a routine so that you can be consistent with your writing is something that will help tremendously. It'll also help on those days where you really don't feel like writing, you don't want to. If you've already made a habit out of it, it'll be much easier to just sit down and put pen to paper. The more you do this, the more consistent you'll become, the more songs you'll write, and the better you'll be for it in the long run. All right, let's get this studio cleaned up, and then I'll give you the last tip. So, as you can see, the studio space is looking much more clean. Still a lot of work to go in the grand scheme of things, but you know, it's definitely better than it was, and we will take all the wins we can get. Now, before I give you the final tip, check this out. Look what I found. The trombone. So when I was home for the holidays, my parents, for some reason, had my cousin's old trombone, and they were like, we have no use for this, we're gonna give it to you. Now, I played trombone for a couple of years in high school band. I was a trumpet player, and then I switched to trombone when my band instructor needed more trombone players. So I actually do have a little bit of experience with this. However, I have not touched a trombone in probably about 15 years. So I thought what might be fun is I'm gonna give this a little bit of a test ride, and what you guys are about to hear is my first attempt at playing trombone in a decade and a half. Brace yourselves. Wow, okay. That was a little bit rough. There you go. I still know where the notes are, it just takes me a little bit to find them. All right, I'm gonna stop procrastinating. I'm gonna give you guys this final tip. All right, the house is much more clean than when it began. Feels good. Let's get to the final tip. Tip number 6 for how to stay organized as a songwriter is honestly just have fun with it, man. No, I'm completely kidding. Tip number 6 is organize your surroundings. As a creative, you wanna set up a space conducive to your creativity. And for me, I found that if I just live in chaos and clutter, it impedes my ability to have clarity of thought and a smooth workflow. When I do things like I did today, where I clean up my house, organize my belongings, beautify things a little bit, decorate, it just puts me in the right frame of mind to be creative. It inspires me to want to sit down and try to come up with something new and innovate. Your environment does not just exist out here, it exists up here too. Now, I'm a very naturally disorganized and messy person, so what you saw today, that was me swimming upstream. That goes against my nature. But if I can do it, and you guys saw me do it, you can certainly do it too. Even just a little bit of time and care put into your surroundings, your writing space, your creative thinking space, can make a world of difference. So clean up your space, clean up your mind, and get writing. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.